Can you raise Starfleet?
No, sir, but I've got ship-to-ship communications back. Picking up Captain Kirk.
On audio, Lieutenant.
The original Star Trek series was filmed on cardboard sets and built on borrowed dreams. But behind the sets, the real stories were far more complicated. One cast member battled a secret addiction that nearly destroyed his career. Another spent years fighting to be taken seriously in an industry that never saw him as the lead. And one of them would leave the show only to become more iconic than anyone could have predicted. Today, most of the original crew has crossed what Spock might have called the final frontier. But the lives they lived on Earth were crazier than anything written in the script. This is the cast of Star Trek nearly 60 years after. Curious about this story and want more like it? Subscribe and turn on the bell. We have a huge library of them. 1. Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock. On February 23, 2015, Leonard Nimoy posted a message to his followers. A life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had, but not preserved, except in memory. LLAP. He sent nothing after that, and 4 days later, he was dead. Leonard Nimoy was born in 1931 in the West End of Boston, the son of Ukrainian Jewish immigrants. He started acting in his 20s, teaching classes to pay the rent and taking whatever small television parts he could find. When Gene Roddenberry offered him the role of a half-human, half-Vulcan science officer, the network told Roddenberry the pointed ears would frighten viewers, but eventually, the ears stayed. Then Spock became something neither Nimoy nor anyone else had expected. The alien who processed everything through logic and suppressed everything human somehow became the audience's favorite. He became the symbol for people who felt like they didn't belong anywhere. Spock became Nimoy, even if he spent years rejecting it. In 1975, he wrote a book called I Am Not Spock. Then, 20 years later, he wrote another called I Am Spock. He eventually made peace with himself and his role. Some roles are larger than the people who play them, and people can become the roles they play. Did you know he based the Vulcan salute on a blessing from Leonard's Jewish heritage? He saw a rabbi perform it as a boy and never forgot it. He brought it to the character. The character gave it to the world. See how he became the role he played? But there was also something else he brought. Something the audience never saw. At the height of the show's success, Leonard was a high-functioning alcoholic. He drank through the pressure, the fame, and the strange weight of becoming a character the world couldn't separate from the man. He admitted later that he was drinking even while working. It took years before he finally stepped away from it. Rehab and reflection gave him a second chance at life. He would offer this second chance to another cast member, but we'll get to that later. Leonard directed Star Trek 3 and 4. He was a photographer, a poet, and briefly a recording artist. He mentored younger cast members, helped careers that had stalled, and carried himself with a dignity that he had genuinely earned. In 2014, he announced on Twitter that he had been diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. This was the results of decades of smoking that had damaged his lungs even after he quit in 1984. He regretted the time he smoked, and he immediately began to warn his fans not to smoke. Leonard Nimoy died February 27, 2015, at age 83 years old, with a net worth of approximately $45 million. Rest easy, Spock. Spock didn't feel anything, but this next cast member felt everything and wept. 2. William Shatner, Captain Kirk. On October 13, 2021, a 90-year-old William Shatner climbed into a rocket capsule in the Texas desert and went to space. When the capsule returned and the hatch opened, William Shatner climbed out and started crying because of what he saw in space. It was so moving, he said. I was overwhelmed. The man who had spent 3 years pretending to explore the universe had finally seen a small piece of it. He became, at 90, the oldest person ever to fly in space. Shatner was born in Montreal on March 22, 1931. He was a classically trained Shakespearean actor who arrived at Star Trek from a career of stage and film, and it showed. William gave every line in the series the full theatrical tradition treatment. He turned the dramatic pause into a signature, and became world famous for his distinctive performance style. But some critics think he was just overacting. What do you think? Shatner has dealt with career controversies here and there. One of them is the feud with George Takei, who fans know as Sulu. They have not spoken in years, and it doesn't look like they ever will. But there is one controversy that will always make fans curious. In 1999, William arrived at his home and saw his third wife drowning in their swimming pool. He had filed to divorce her the previous year. So what happened to her? Whatever the truth of that marriage was, he kept it private. William is 95 years old now. He's currently promoting several projects because slowing down is something he doesn't understand. And with a net worth estimated at $100 million, it's easy to see why. Kirk got the glory, but this next guy got the love. 3. Deforest Kelley, Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy. Before Star Trek, Deforest Kelley spent years playing villains in westerns. He had an angular face, steady eyes, and a voice that could carry threat without effort. Hollywood looked at him and saw a bad guy, so that's what he played. Picture after picture, television episode after television episode, he was the man you were not supposed to trust. But Gene Roddenberry looked at the same face and saw the ship's physician and the conscience of the Enterprise. Kelley was 46 when they filmed the first season. He brought genuine warmth and a combative tenderness that made the character feel real among a set full of cardboard. Even the writers couldn't have scripted this. In a company of large personalities and tensions, Kelley was the one nobody had a bad word about. He was, by most accounts, exactly what he appeared to be on screen. Decent, warm, quietly funny, genuinely present with other people. Hollywood looked at that face and saw a villain. His castmates saw the kindest man in the room. He was the first of the 3 leads to die. Deforest Kelley passed away on June 11, 1999 from stomach cancer when he was 79 years old. There was no dramatic final act, no public reinvention, no complicated legacy to untangle. In an industry that turns everything into a story, Deforest Kelley had the rare dignity of simply being what he appeared to be. Kelley had no tragedy, but Nichelle Nichols had one she never talked about. 4. Nichelle Nichols, Lieutenant Uhura. Do you remember the Heaven's Gate cult? Nichelle Nichols' brother Thomas was a high-ranking member of the cult. He believed in it completely. He spent 2 decades there. On March 26, 1997, 39 members of Heaven's Gate were found dead in a rented mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California. They had taken phenobarbital and vodka. They believed a spacecraft was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet and it had come to collect their souls. Thomas Nichols died among them, wearing the same black uniform and new Nike trainers as the others. He was 59 years old. Nichelle Nichols was at a convention appearance when she heard. She had spent years watching the cult from the outside, unable to reach him. She grieved in public and kept working. Her brother's loss is the private weight she carried for the rest of her life. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for Nichelle. After Star Trek's first season, Nichols handed Gene Roddenberry a resignation. The network had been cutting her lines, and executives had been intercepting her fan mail. She had been offered a Broadway role, and she wanted to go back to the theater where she belonged. Roddenberry asked her to take the weekend before deciding, so she did. That weekend, at an NAACP fundraiser in Beverly Hills, an organizer told her there was a fan who wanted to meet her. Nichols assumed it was a Trekkie. She turned around and found herself looking at Martin Luther King Jr. He told her he was her biggest fan. He told her Star Trek was the only show he and Coretta allowed their children to stay up and watch. And when she told him she was leaving, the smile left his face. "You cannot," he said. "For the first time on television, we will be seen as we should be seen every day, as intelligent, quality, beautiful people who can go to space." She went back on Monday morning. Roddenberry opened his desk drawer and handed her the resignation letter in 100 pieces. He had torn it up before she even returned. After the show ended, NASA hired her to recruit women and minorities for the astronaut program. She brought in Sally Ride, Guyon Bluford, Judith Resnick, and Ronald McNair. These women were the ones who became the first American woman in space, the first African American in orbit, and 2 of the 7 who died on the Challenger. Sally Ride told Nichols directly that she had applied because of her. Nichelle's net worth is approximately $1 million, and everything she set in motion by joining NASA is still in motion. She died July 30th, 2022, and was cremated. Her remains were put in a spaceship and launched into space. Have you ever wondered what happens when the writers decide they no longer need an actor? 5. Grace Lee Whitney, Yeoman Janice Rand. Grace Lee Whitney was written out of Star Trek after 8 episodes. Officially, she was written out because executives wanted Kirk to pursue more romantic storylines, and having a personal yeoman created a complication. It was a creative decision, the kind of thing that happens in television production every day, but it wasn't. Then again, maybe it was. What Whitney wrote about in her 1998 memoir was something else. She said that just before she was fired, a television executive she referred to only as the executive sexually assaulted her. She said she knew as she left the room that her time on the show was over. She was right. But knowing was different from accepting and being ready. She spiraled. Alcohol first, then drugs, then both together. She described what followed as trying to drink herself to death. She nearly succeeded. For nearly a decade after leaving the show, she could not get sober long enough to work steadily. She showed up to the auditions smelling of alcohol, and as a result, her career stalled. But one person wouldn't let her lose herself completely: Leonard Nimoy. He knew how dangerous alcohol addiction was and pulled her back. When he directed Star Trek III in 1984, he cast her in it, then cast her in Star Trek IV. The return of the franchise gave her footing. The fellowship work she had started after she got better gave her something larger than her career to stand on. She spent the last 35 years of her life helping other people get sober. Women's prisons, the Salvation Army, 12-step programs. Her family said that she had helped thousands of people through recovery. When she died on May 1st, 2015, they asked that she be remembered not as a Star Trek actress, but as a successful survivor of addiction. That was the life she had chosen. The writers wrote her out, and she spent 50 years writing a better ending herself. These are the kind of stories we tell. Hit that like button if that story deserves to be heard. 6. James Doohan. Montgomery, Scotty Scott. James Doohan should have died. Earlier during D-Day on June 6, 1944, Lieutenant James Doohan of 14th Field Artillery Regiment of the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division had led his men across a minefield and shot 2 German snipers who were pinning them down. He had done his part on that historic day, but the day wasn't done with him yet. At 11:30 in the night, he was walking back to his command post after a cigarette when he was shot 6 times. But it wasn't the enemy who shot him. It was a nervous Canadian sentry who mistook him for the enemy. 4 bullets hit his leg, 1 hit his chest, and would have killed him except that his brother had given him a silver cigarette case as a good luck charm. That case stopped the bullet meant for his heart. He later joked it was the only time being a smoker had saved his life, even though going off to smoke nearly killed him in the first place. But his fingers weren't so lucky. 1 bullet took off his right middle finger. After the war, he enrolled in a drama class on a whim and showed promise. He won a scholarship to the neighborhood playhouse in New York. James became a master of voices and dialects. He was so good at this that when he auditioned for Star Trek, he tried 7 different accents, and the producers asked which he preferred. He told them the Scottish engineer accent, and they agreed. He spent 3 years hiding the missing finger on camera. Hand doubles, careful positioning. The costume department helped. You can catch a glimpse of it in one shot during the Trouble with Tribbles if you know where to look. But he never hit it at conventions, where he signed thousands of autographs with the remaining fingers on a hand that had survived a war by luck and cigarettes. The Milwaukee School of Engineering gave him an honorary degree after a survey found that nearly half their student body had chosen engineering because of Scotty. Neil Armstrong thanked him in person in 2004. James Doohan died July 20th, 2005 of Alzheimer's disease and pneumonia at 85 years old. After his death, his family arranged for a portion of his ashes to be smuggled aboard the International Space Station by a NASA astronaut who was a fan. It took 60 years and a sympathetic astronaut, but he finally made it to orbit. 2 more names now. 7. George Takei. Hikaru Sulu. George Takei was 5 years old when the United States government put his family in an internment camp. It was 1942. America was at war with Japan, and more than 100,000 Japanese Americans were removed from their homes by executive order and held in camps across the country. Takei's family was taken to Rower, Arkansas. He spent 3 years behind barbed wire. He remembered the soldiers with rifles. He remembered his father lining the family up to go to the mess hall. He remembered being a child in a place that was not built for children. Then, with his history on his back, he became an actor. He got the role of Hikaru Sulu on Star Trek and became a starship commander. But nobody found it remarkable. No one saw his history and patted him on the back for his resilience. What people see is his feud with Shatner that has never been resolved. But that doesn't matter to Takei. What matters more is what he did with the rest of his life. He came out publicly as homosexual in 2005 and married Brad Altman the moment California law permitted it in 2008. He spent the 2010s building one of the most followed social media presence of any actor from his generation. He is 88 years old, still online, still sharp, still productively furious about injustice in a way that does not seem performed. His net worth is estimated at $14 million. The child who sat behind barbed wire at Rower grew up to steer a starship. George Takei understood better than most what that image was worth. We're now on the last cast member on this roundup. He wasn't hired because of his talent, but as a marketing decision. 8. Walter Koenig, Ensign Chekov. Walter Koenig was hired because of his youthful looks. So the producers had noticed that the monkeys were drawing massive teenage audiences, and they wanted something similar, a young, shaggy-haired face on the Enterprise bridge. Walter Koenig was 31, but looked younger. They put a wig on him because his natural hair was not sufficiently Beatles-adjacent. He played Ensign Chekov with a Russian accent that no Russian has ever endorsed, and became part of the most iconic ensemble in science fiction history. Decades down the line, Walter is now 89 years old, still attending conventions, still signing photographs with a warmth. But his visits to conventions hide a deep darkness within him. In February 2010, Walter Koenig was in Vancouver with a group of 10 friends who had been searching Stanley Park for over a week. His son Andrew had gone missing. Andrew was 41 years old. He was a character actor who had been battling depression. He had played a recurring role on Growing Pains in the 1980s and never quite escaped the gravity of that particular fame. He had gone quiet. Walter eventually found his son on February 25th. Andrew's body was found in a wooded section of the park. He had taken his own life. Walter Koenig announced it at a press conference that day, his wife Judy beside him, his face carrying something that no amount of convention appearances or fan warmth can touch. He urged anyone with suicidal thoughts to seek help before making that final decision. He stood at a podium in Vancouver and said the thing parents are not supposed to have to say. And then he went home and continued living. He carries it. He has never pretended otherwise. 60 years on, the show is still running in syndication somewhere on Earth right now at this exact moment. Not many know the history of those who made it. Now you do. You know what they lost, what the show took from them, and what they gained. Now you know what didn't make the credits. So, what will you do with the stories you've just watched? Share it with someone who grew up watching this crew with you. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves.